Now we come to the fifth and the last part of this particular lecture. It is module number 7. It is letter A still. The very last part is entitled The Pattern of God's Saving Action. We've walked very briefly through the Pentateuch from Genesis through Deuteronomy, spent most of our time in Genesis, setting the foundation, and then showed how in the rest of the Pentateuch you see the fulfillment of the 3 promises to Abraham. God promises him a relationship. This is established at Mount Sinai and in the sanctuary services. God promised Abraham to have many descendants, and certainly by the time of Exodus story, Israel is a quite numerous nation. Then you also have the promise of the land, and by Numbers and Deuteronomy, that promise is in the prospect of being fulfilled. So you see then that through the Pentateuch as a whole, the promises are fulfilled. Let me emphasize once more, though, the key concept. The text above all texts in the book of Genesis is chapter 12, verses 1 to 3. That original promise to Abraham looks back. It's a hinge text. It looks back to, first of all, the creation, the 3 relationships of creation, and it looks back to the fall, the breaking of those 3 relationships. These 3 promises to Abraham, though, also look forward in the Pentateuch. They look forward to the fulfillment of the many descendants that begins toward the end of the book of Genesis, where you have as many as 70 who can call themselves relatives of Abraham. Then in Exodus and Leviticus, you see God establishing the relationship between himself and Israel. He's fulfilling that promise of blessing and relationship to Abraham. And then finally in Numbers and Deuteronomy, you see the fulfillment of the promise that he would be settled in a land that God would show him. So Abraham, in a real sense, is called to restore the entire human race, to restore the Garden of Eden, that in establishing the blessing to Abraham, God will ultimately bless all nations and all peoples, as we see clearly stated in Genesis 12, 1 to 3. Now, there's a very interesting text that is sort of a philosophical basis, perhaps, for what we're about to do, and that's in Ecclesiastes, chapter 3. And begin with verse 11 and much of what follows up to verse 15. And chapter 3, verse 11, it says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end." And verse 14, "I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. God does it so that men will revere him. Whatever is has already been, and whatever will be has been before, and God will call the past to an account." Here the focus is definitely on the actions of God. And it indicates that there will be a pattern in God's actions. As you observe the past, the present, and the future, you will see a pattern developing in terms of the actions of God.